Welcome into the Scene Project Sports Network. I'm your host, Bubba Startz, and we have a very special guest with us today, longtime professional broadcaster, Jeff Rimmer. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Bubba. Looking forward to this, and we have been for a better part of a week when you and I first hooked up.
Well, and I forget that we're going to have to add author to your title here very soon as you're getting ready to publish your new book. It doesn't get any better than this. We're going to talk a lot more about that as we get on the conversation, but I'd love to open up the show here. Just getting a little bit of your backstory, your lengthy career in the broadcasting world, and we'll pick it up from there.
Well, it's been a long career, and I never worked a day in my life. I can tell you that I knew in high school, the 10th grade, that I was going to be a professional broadcaster because coming from Canada and growing up for my first 16 years in Toronto, I wanted to be a National Hockey League player. But unfortunately, my career was short-lived. My dad passed away. My mom remarried. We moved to Calgary. Made a good friend of John Davidson, who starred for the New York Rangers. Met him in the 10th grade in high school. He convinced me to try out. He was an outstanding goaltender in junior hockey, and he had me try out for the AAA midget team. I was cut before practice. Then, how about this? I get tapped on the shoulder before practice. I'm the first guy off the ice. Told House League starts Monday. Went to House League, outdoor rink. Next thing I know, I'm on the snowbank, and it was at that point I decided I was going to be a hockey broadcaster. But it was a long ways from the 10th grade in a snowbank to eventually making it to the National Hockey League. But I also spent a good deal of time in baseball and the Olympics. I did the Olympics in '76 in Montreal for the Canadian network CBC, working alongside ABC and Chris Schenkel, Hall of Fame broadcaster. Jim McKay was right there as well. That was the '76 Olympics, and I had the featured event, which was gymnastics with Nadia Comaneci and all her tens. And I was pronouncing the names correctly because CBC was kind enough to send me to events before the Olympics. And then they asked me to help out with ABC and the pronunciations of the Russians and the Romanian names. And boy, that was an asset now, covering hockey for as long as I did. But 48 years in the NHL, 20 years in baseball, both in Montreal with the Expos in those early 80s when they had Gary Carter, Andre Dawson, Tim Raines, all Hall of Famers today. And then on to Baltimore with my good friend Cal Ripken Jr. And there's a funny story in my book about Cal and I and being renamed Jeff Ripken as opposed to Jeff Rimmer, but there's a story behind that as well. We may have time, but certainly the book is there, and it's a great all-encompassing book, not only for sports fans of hockey, baseball, Olympics, and whatever, but it's also a bit of a tutorial for young people that want to get into broadcasting or journalism on how to do it and how hard you have to work and how to set it all up. But that's certainly something we can discuss later.
Well, and I love that because we are new in this space as broadcasters and journalists around sports. And really anyone has that ability to do it. It's a reason that we started the sports network on the YouTube channel and on the podcast feeds, because we have our own takes. We want to talk about sports. It's what we're doing anyway. And with the proliferation of fan generated content available on the internet, it was, why not? If you have the ability to do so, and you have, whether it's just yourself doing a solo show, or you have guys that would love to get together and share that experience and talk about, whatever sport it is, right? We talk football, we talk golf on this network, baseball and hockey coming later this year, which is why I reached out but I didn't know that we were going to get to have this conversation. And I love that in your book, the tutorial of teaching young people how they can do it. The barrier to entry is much lower now than it ever was for you growing up.
Absolutely. It's hard work. I think it's a little tougher now to get to that upper echelon, and you see all these cutbacks. Look at ESPN yesterday. Karl Ravech, 33 years. Ravech spent, he was their #1 broadcaster on Major League Baseball. Cut. He's out of ESPN when his contract's up. It's a very, very tough situation today, and that's why you've got to work. You've got to work to get there. And as I've said to many young broadcasters and journalists, and I get tapes and talk to a lot of people along the way, you have to be committed and prepared to really pay a price. But guess what? When you get to the top of the mountain, it's very, very rewarding.
Well, and a life well lived, right? I don't know any broadcaster, and I know most of them feel exactly like you do, that they never had to work in a day. They never dreaded going to the office because you got to go and to not just call the games, but to become friends with some of these players and absolute legends of the game. You obviously dropped Cal Ripken Jr.'s name out there, and others, and Muhammad Ali while we were off, and so many people that you've had a brief interaction with, and you don't become best friends with all of them, but you get to kind of, I equate it to, touching the sun a little bit, right? You get up close and personal and get to have these conversations and ask that one question that maybe now becomes a clip that lasts forever.
Bubba, let me say from the outset here, and this is something that I learned very, very young in my career, and in fact had a executive actually applaud me for my take, and that is you never break a confidence. And I've made a lot of great friends along the way in sports. I've maintained a lot of friendships, and again, it's illustrated in the book as well. You don't ever break a confidence. If you can gain the trust of these athletes, these performers, these entertainers, you're in for life, and they will respect you beyond your belief. And that is something that I've cherished since early on. And as I had a young executive tell me early on in my career, it is so important. It is so important to maintain professionalism, but also the confidence of the people that you're talking to, that you're not going to burn them. And yeah, I mean, I'm not the kind of guy and there are broadcasters that are very successful today that they're poison pens. They're poison broadcasters. They don't care. They'll tell you what they believe, and they may expose a thing or two. But those are the guys that, they live their life, but I choose to live it differently, and I have throughout my career.
Yeah, and without any regrets, I don't think that any of us as broadcasters and sports journalists that I'm never doing it for the clicks or for some notoriety and a brief flash in the pan. I'm
Good for
doing
you.
it because I love the access. I love getting to hear the stories. And for me, being someone who works for a nonprofit, Operation Combating Veteran Suicide, which you can see behind me here as director of marketing and PR, I'm always looking for an angle maybe to have these people help us with their foundation, but also to help them with theirs. So I'm much more interested in getting to know them on a more personal level and finding ways that we can serve them in their foundation and doing some good in the world, rather than just betraying their confidence and printing something that you would know they would never want out there, or, besmirching someone's name just for a few clicks and a quick bit of notoriety on the internet.
Well, good for you, Bubba. And before coming on with you and finding out a little bit more about you, I really appreciate and respect what you're doing, not only on the air and these podcasts and whatever, but what you're doing in your community and communities around. Good for you. And I know that you're a first-rate person, and a lot of success is going to already come your way. There's even more ahead.
I appreciate that. Means the world to me coming from you, Jeff. I know it's hard to narrow it down to just a few moments, and that's why your book is as extensive as it is. But is there one call that sticks out with you among the, tens of thousands that will just be something that, in your later years that has just stuck with you? And what's that one moment that you'll live with forever?
There's the book, and there is the call. It doesn't get any better than this. There's a backup title as well, Unforgettable Calls in the Booth and Unexpected Turns in Life. But that call was ruled on TSN in Canada the goal of the decade. ESPN used it on their promotion for hockey for quite some time. Never got any royalties, but it was great. It was great to see the sport and that call used. And what it was a goal in Arizona, the Phoenix Coyotes and the Columbus Blue Jackets. And Rick Nash, the captain and a player certainly capable of being in the Hall of Fame, the greatest Blue Jacket of all time, their captain and a good, great personal friend. He got a penalty late in the game. It resulted in a power play goal for Arizona, tying the game late. There was maybe a little more than a minute left in the game. And what happened next was, and I could see Rick Nash, and I read his mind. He was so upset about the penalty, which needlessly never should have been called, and came out of the box, picked up the puck on a pass from Mike Pekka, went through the entire Coyotes team, beat the goaltender after turning the two defensemen around like turnstiles, and put the puck into the net for the game-winning goal. It was a thing of beauty. And as I said in calling the goal, and it was spontaneous, it doesn't get any better than this. And it doesn't, because as I say, it was the goal of the decade. I was just a small part of it.
And that's why we watch sports. That's why we're enthralled with live sports and every bit that we can, now having it available on our phones and with us all the time. I know that I have always been a huge fan of being in the stadium, especially for hockey. Those who don't understand the game of hockey, just go watch it in person. It's okay to watch on TV and it can be exciting there, but being in the stadium for the energy and the elation of a goal, especially if you're in your home stadium. But, as a Blackhawks fan, I've gotten to visit a few opposing stadiums as well. And sometimes it's even better celebrating in enemy territory.
Well, let me tell you that I've been broadcasting long enough to have called games in the old Chicago Stadium. And you have to go up the stairs all the way to the top of the old building and then climb through the stands and out into a bucket over the ice at the old stadium. And it was great because you were literally hanging over the ice. And let me tell you, you could almost reach out and touch the players below you. And I saw some great Blackhawks. My youngest memory of the Chicago Blackhawks is 1961. It's the year they won the Stanley Cup. And players like Bobby Hull and Ken Warren, Pierre Pilote, I can go through the entire team, Glenn Hall in goal. My dad in Toronto let me stay up till midnight to watch the cup being presented to the Blackhawks, and that was certainly one of my thrills. Of course, the United Center in Chicago is a spectacular building, one of my favorites in the entire National Hockey League. It is huge, and when they sing the anthem in that building, it's second to none.
Yeah, there's nobody better. Jim Corneliuson, I've had the trade, and before him, we've been blessed, right? Absolutely, as sports fans in Chicago. We've lived in South Dakota for years, but I've always had attachments to the teams there. And it's been a blessing for me. It's probably why I am so passionate about, sports to this day. Really no better sports cities. I don't think there's a very short list of cities that rank up there. Talk about being, I know that you kind of came on with Columbus when the franchise was just starting. You had been out of the league, I think, for a little bit during the lockout you had mentioned. Talk about coming back and kind of being there for the beginning of a franchise.
Well, actually, I was there for the lockout year. They hired me immediately once word came that there was a chance at that time that the National Hockey League would be shut down because Gary Bettman, the commissioner, wanted a salary cap, which he got by basically sitting out that entire 2004-2005 season. I had a 4-year contract with Fox Sports in Florida. I did the Florida Panthers through their first 11 years of the franchise, and agreed to a new 4-year contract that was sent to New York and rejected because they pretty well knew, and Gary Bettman was up front with all the rights holders, that they would likely lose the entire season unless they got that salary cap. So my contract was sent back to Florida, and what they did was they said, we'll pay you 2 years, and then the other 2 will kick in once we know there's hockey. Even if there's a partial lockout, we'll pick up the remaining 2 years, and accordingly, we'll move along. Well, we'll make an offer to you, which they did subsequent to the lockout starting. And Columbus, which had approached me when the franchise started, said, "We want you now." And I said, "No, I'm not coming." But when the lockout looked like it was a reality, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse and went there. And that first year, the lockout year, I basically worked in the office and went out. We did a number of personal appearances. We wanted to keep this young franchise out there in the public. So we played ball hockey with kids all around the state of Ohio. We made all kinds of presentations. We were on television, we were on radio. And then when the season started, it was great. And again, I started in the NHL in Montreal, the Canadiens. I saw 4 straight Stanley Cups in the late 70s. I went to Baltimore, Washington. I did the Orioles and then did the Capitals. I actually lived halfway between the two cities, the Baltimore-Washington corridor. If I did baseball, I went one way. If I did hockey, I went to Washington. Ended up with George Michael on the Sports Machine on weekends and worked at NBC. And then from there, got this terrific offer to go to Florida and start with the new franchise there. I'm the first broadcaster that first season to do both a partial schedule of the Florida Panthers and the Washington Capitals, do 2 different teams in the same season. There's a story in the book about both teams coming to me and said, "Okay, the Panthers almost made the playoffs in the inaugural season, and they wanted me to do their games. Capitals wanted me to do their games." And they asked me, "Okay, which games you're going to do?" Well, I held them at bay as long as I could. Florida fell off. They had the best record of inaugural team until Vegas came in the league. But I ended up doing the Capital games and all but 3 games for the Florida Panthers during the regular season. And that's when they offered me another long-term 4-year contract to do not only Florida Panthers hockey, but I did arena football. So it was quite a move to Florida. Loved every minute of it. And then when the Blue Jackets came calling, went to Columbus for 20 years. And I got to say, best move I ever made. Loved Columbus. Reminded me a lot about Baltimore. The Midwest people are the best. You're a Midwestern guy. You know what it's all about. Columbus is the sleeper city in the entire country. Great place to raise a family. Great city. Love the Blue Jackets. And I'm a Blue Jacket for life.
Really incredible. And I think something to point out here, because you were already well established, right? Being with the Canadiens organization and then with the Capitals organization, Florida just starting out knew that they needed someone that could be a trusted voice in that booth, and no different the Blue Jackets. So elaborate on that a little bit of why it's so important for a new franchise to have that kind of trusted voice in there and to have that for a new franchise, especially to help introduce new fans in a new city to a game that obviously you've loved your entire life.
What a great point by you, Bubba. And you know the point because you're not saying it, I will. That's a very, very classic commentary. And the reason why, you've got to establish roots in that community. You've got to establish the team in that community. And you make the point right here without giving the name. The guy in Chicago, Eddie Olchuk, left the Blackhawks. Bit of a contract dispute. Eddie and I are really close friends. Wasn't happy with the situation and then left for Seattle, the new franchise. He's still there in Seattle, in addition to doing the games for TNT. You want to talk about an established voice moving to a new hockey market. They've had hockey in the past. They had a minor league team for years. Junior hockey's been there. They've had a professional team way back when. And here they are in the National Hockey League, a great franchise, a franchise that is growing. They want to have more of an impact this coming season. I've talked to people out there, including Eddie, and they're trying to beef up the team to be a little more competitive in the Western Conference. But you're right, you've got to have those established people that can help bring the community together, make them hockey fans if they're not, and for the educated hockey fans, give them a little bit more. And that's what Eddie does. That's what I attempted to do when I first went to Columbus. That's what I attempted to do when I first went to Florida. I was fortunate enough in Washington, the franchise was already established. And you want to talk about the Montreal Canadiens. They won 4 cups those years that I was there in the late 70s. And I lived on the West Island, the predominantly English part of Montreal, and most of the players were right there. So we were together, whether it was on the ice, whether it was in the dressing room, or whether it was somewhere on the road. And those were great years too.
Yeah, you probably got another 5 books in you with all the stories you could tell.
Maybe a few. The publisher's teasing another book already, but I'm happy with this one because it should be going to print this week. As I said, this book, it doesn't get any better than this, should be available on the jeffrimmer.com site, which will take you directly to Amazon, or go to Amazon. And the book should be out in September, and it's a great read. And I think, as I said, is very helpful to young people that are thinking in terms of their career. I knew very early what I wanted to do, and I'm sure a lot of people that are tuning in here, watching this podcast, have some pretty good idea where they'd like to be too, because I can't tell you how many broadcasters, future broadcasters, podcasters, radio, television people, and journalists that I talk to and get tapes from that I can help out. Anybody I can help out, that's my job away from the sport. I want to give something back to the sports of hockey and, of course, the broadcasting as a whole. Not to mention baseball.
I love it, Jeff. Yeah, well, obviously, you know my roots, being a North Sider fan my entire life. Love my Cubbies. We've had some of the best. I love the radio broadcast, and listening to the games, especially with baseball, because they can be, a lot shorter now than they used to be, with all the changes that they've made. But it would be much better for me to sit and feel like you're, watching with a friend and having that described to you. That's very hard to do. And I don't think that it gets the respect necessarily that it deserves, but kind of alluding to your point about Eddie O and coming over to having a trusted voice in that booth is just an underrated piece of a new franchise. And I think that as fans, we don't, because you have to understand that not only is the city, you have existing hockey fans that are probably living there that probably grew up rooting for another team. So you can't, if you want to pull those people in, then you have to have someone that they are aware of and that they can trust to know hockey. It's a huge piece to that. And no doubt why, Columbus made you the offer that you couldn't refuse all those years ago to bring you in. I just love your point on that. I don't want to keep you too much longer, Jeff, but I really want to talk about the process of writing the book. How much fun was it to take the trip down memory lane and to go over some of these old calls and maybe reviewing the tape yourself and refreshing the memory in preparation for the book?
A lot of work, and having retired here recently, it gave me a lot of time. And actually, everyone says, well, what's your hobby? What are you doing now? I put a lot of effort into this. I have a great ghostwriter who had written a book previously, and Craig Mers, and we spent a lot of time on tapes, working out. That's my dog there. Hey. Spending a lot of time on tapes and answering questions and doing some research and that kind of thing. But it was a lot of fun. A lot of it was right up here. A lot of it was written down. And it brought back just great memories. And I'd make some notes. And then in the middle of the night, I'd wake up. And say, oh my, I've got another story. And I'd get up out of bed, start writing, finish maybe 45 minutes later, then hop back into bed and get up the next morning and then rewrite what I'd written the night before. So it was something. I'll tell you a funny story. As a 20-year-old, while I was going to university in Calgary, Mount Royal University, then it was called Mount Royal College, I got my own TV show on cable TV, the community channel. They had just started cable TV, had come to Calgary for the first time. And you might be too young to remember, but Muhammad Ali, you're still a young guy. Muhammad Ali was stripped of the title, the greatest of all time, and the reason why he would not go to Vietnam. Well, he came shortly before his being reinstated, or agreed, and actually was there for reinstatement, to fight 3-round exhibitions. And it was a major news conference. There were cameras because he had just come back and being reinstated. He was the heavyweight champion of the world, top of his game when he was stripped of the title. So he came to Calgary. So every U.S. network, ABC, NBC, CBS was there. All the Canadian networks were there. And I was 20 years old, and I was going to get the heavyweight champion of the world to come and do a half-hour show with me. Well, people laughed at me. Now, I went to the airport when he came, and I actually met him, introduced myself, shook hands with him, and I'll follow up on that in a minute. Fast forward to the press conference, and I go to Angelo Dundee, his longtime manager, and Angelo Hang on 1 second here. Sorry about that.
You're good, Jeff. You and the champ.
All right. So I go to the press conference. I talk to Allie's manager, Angelo Dundee, and I said, Mr. Dundee, I don't want to talk to the champ. He says, no problem. He says, wait for the one-on-ones and get your camera, and away we go. And I said, no, I don't have a camera, but I got a studio up the road. And everybody starts chuckling. These people say, oh, yeah, the heavyweight champion of the world is going to go to this studio. And I said, oh, it's not that far. It's just up the hill here on McLeod Trail. Well, this is at the Stampede grounds, world famous Calgary Stampede. So fast forward, the press conference is over. He does one-on-ones. He's magnificent, comes over, taps Dundee on the shoulder and says, okay, Angelo, time to go. Ali looks around. Dundee says, 1 second, champ. This young man here wants to talk to you. So he remembered me obviously from the airport, but he kind of gives me the once over again. And he says, okay, kid, where's your camera? And I said, sir, I don't have a camera, but I got a studio up the road. Everybody breaks out laughing. He looks around, turns to the limo driver and says, do you know where this studio is? He says, yeah, the kid's right. It's just 1.5 miles up the road. He tells me, go, take off. I'll be up there with the entourage. I race up to the studio, tell him to get it ready. Nobody believes me. The heavyweight champion of the world is now coming to this little cable TV station. Somehow word got around the 3-story building. All the secretaries are in the lobby thinking maybe we'll get a glimpse of the heavyweight champion of the world. Okay. In walks the general manager from lunch and he says, what's all the commotion here? Jeff Rimmer says, heavyweight champion of the world's coming. Muhammad Ali. He starts laughing. There's not a chance, and you know what? So guess what? 2 seconds later, in walks Ali with the entourage. We sit down. We do 20 minutes. He turns to the camera and he says, hey, what did you say your name was, kid? I said, Jeff Rimmer. Goes to the camera and he says, pointing, this young man here, Jeff Rimmer, has held his own with me, Muhammad Ali, and I predict in 5 years, after naming Johnny Carson, Jack Parr, Michael Douglas, and everybody else, Jeff Rimmer will become the greatest sportscaster in the world. I said, thank you. He said, in your dreams, got up and walked out.
What an incredible way to end this interview, Jeff. Looking forward to reading the book. I encourage everyone else to find that. Jeff Rimmer is R-I-M-E-R, JeffCommonSpelling.com. You can find more about the book there. It's been an absolute pleasure strolling down memory lane with you, learning a bit more about you. And I look forward to working in the future with you. Congratulations on your recent retirement and getting this book out there finally. I know it's got to be an exciting time for you.
It is, Bubba. Anytime you need anything, by all means, just reach out. You know how to get me. It's been a pleasure joining you, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thrilling. That's Jeff Rimmer, everybody. Thanks for being part of the scene, Jeff.
My pleasure.
Skunked Golf. Look good even if your game stinks.